Is it about me and what's best for me, or is it about being in service to the larger mission?
Today, we're going to be talking about navigating the minefield. How do you manage toxic high performers who are on your executive team? And joining me to talk about this topic is Dr. Jeff Kaplan, Executive Leadership Coach of the Year. Jeff, welcome to the podcast.
All right, thanks, Raj. Great to be here.
Let's start off with the topic of how you identify toxic high performers. So one thing that you do as a new leader is you go in and you take a look at who your team is, and some of them may be high performers. So how do you differentiate between those that are high performing team members and those who are toxic yet productive?
You know, because they're leaving a lot of dead bodies,
Okay.
right? Seriously, you're getting increased HR complaints. People don't want to work with them. You notice that they tend to come from a place of ego versus what's best for them. So, for example, maybe they don't share information because they see that as some sort of threat. Something I've been saying a lot for the last, I don't know, several years is that these toxic, high performing leaders have been around for centuries. The problem is they've been able to hide and they can no longer hide. In our increased matrixed and diverse work environments, what's happening is that people have to influence people that don't report to them. So when they reported to them, people put their head down. And when you say, do this because I said so, they bite their lip, they do it, right? Maybe they looked for another job, maybe not, because maybe the job market was different. But now they're like, excuse my language, F you, right? And now you don't really have that kind of influence. So at the end of the day, they're coming from a place of self-servingness versus being in service to the mission, the client, the customers, and the organization.
What are some of the other red flags? You mentioned that they leave a trail of dead bodies. What about things like silos of information hoarding, the lack of collaboration and knowledge sharing, things like that?
Yeah, here's your thread that's going to go through everything that you're thinking right now. You and the audience is thinking because we all know the toxic performers, right?
Mm.
The thread, is it about me and what's best for me, or is it about being in service to the larger mission? If I'm in service to the organization and the larger mission, then I'm going to help you, Raj. I'm going to help my colleagues. I'm going to do what I'm going to even put my needs aside occasionally to do what needs to be done right now versus the person who, sure, I'm going to hoard information because I want to be the one that comes with the answer. But think about a team meeting that you've been at, and Raj, it takes 10 minutes of everybody speaking before you immediately know who's the high performer in service to the organization and who's the high performer in service to themselves. And that person who's in service to themselves, they might be able to get away with it for a little bit, but usually the moderate and long term, they usually get caught out and they usually don't last.
So let's talk about the consequences here. What are the long-term consequences of allowing these toxic high performers, even though they're very productive, to continue their behavior unchecked?
Yeah, you lose good people and retain bad people, right? So the underperformers, the people that feel like they've got the best job that they can get, they stick around because they have nowhere else to go. But the people who are high performing, and by the way, the high performers are probably not going to complain about this person, right? Because again, they're coming at it in terms of trying to support the organization and what's best. So they don't want to create problems. They want to just solve problems. But what's going to happen is you're going to lose good people. You're going to have increased HR complaints, right? So retention is going to be a problem. Complaints are going to be a problem. Eventually, productivity goes down. Communication and collaboration gets hindered. Decision quality goes down. So over time, it hits you on the top line, it hits you on the bottom line, it hits you. One department is fighting with another department. It's toxic to the whole environment and it's unsustainable. And real quick, I'll just say this, Raj, like a lot of times I have seen where, let's say the CEO has put up with, we'll say the COO, who is a jerk and doing a lot of things that are really angering a lot of people because they're growing the company. They're doing a lot for the company. And what's happening though is good people start to leave.
That's pretty key and something to you have to watch for because not only will good people leave, but you might even have some challenges recruiting some good people too and being innovative inside your company, which a lot of organizations want to do. Let's pivot a little bit here to the strategies to address toxic high performers. So, what are some of the effective approaches that new leaders to a team can use to confront or manage toxic high performers and their behavior without immediately losing their productivity?
Yeah, so a lot of times when I talk about leading with heart, one of the first questions I get is, Jeff, isn't that ignoring problem people, right? Like by leading with heart. And it's no, you make decisions what's best for the organization through your head, and the way you carry them out is through the heart. And so let's say that you've got someone who's acting in a toxic way. First of all, let's have compassion for them, right? If it's new behavior, I'm going to guess there's something happening in their private life that's problematic. So why don't we just start there? How are you doing, John? I've noticed lately that you're not yourself. And you start there. Are you doing okay? Is everything okay? How can I help? If they say, yeah, everything's fine, then you crank it up to the next level, right? Some of what your behavior, and then you let them know what it is, has been impacting the team, right? And then you say, look, that is not okay, right? I want to help you. Let me know let's figure out what you need from me to make sure that you can continue to be successful, because you are one of our highest performers, and I've known you now for 7 years. I rely a lot on you. So notice, Raj, I'm doing a lot of acknowledging that person's strengths. I wanna keep them here, but it's like a push-pull. I'm gonna bring them in and hug them, and not really hug them, but tell them how awesome they are, and then say, "And this behavior has to stop now. So let's just figure out exactly what we need to do." And they're going to say, "What behavior? Who told you what?" They want to start blaming other people. And so I have a lot to say about that. I'll come back to it. But at the end of the day, this is not about other people. As a leader, you need to make sure that you are collaborating in a way with the people around you, so that so I'm not hearing concerns.
So you touch on the topic of building a resilient team culture, because everything you're describing relates to culture. So, how do executives foster that team culture so that it naturally discourages toxic behavior while still promoting high performance? And can you give some examples of what people can do?
The phrase that comes to mind that we're talking a lot about these days is psychological safety. And a lot of times in teams where everybody, quote, loves each other, I'm brought in because everyone likes each other, but they like each other so much that they don't want to upset the other person. So when someone says, I think we should do this, everyone's, that's a great idea. And then by the end of the meeting, everyone has 10 things that they think we should do. And suddenly we have no real priorities. And then nobody calls out things that need to be called out. And so, from a what do you do about it perspective, one of the things you can do about it is have a set of agreements about how we're going to communicate as a team and how we're going to make decisions as a team. And so, if you notice, for example, you could have on one of your agreements that in any particular decision, we take 2 minutes and maybe we take turns in being devil's advocate, right? And hey, Samantha, could you be devil's advocate and take the other position? Or why don't we all go around and everybody tell me why you think this is not a good idea, right? And let's see if we can come up with some really good reasons why this is not a good idea. Right. The other thing that I've seen companies do in some of my team building work, which I thought was pretty awesome, is they created a visual when people were either opposing what somebody says or going with what somebody says or presenting a new idea. And what that did is it created an obvious, like, visual representation of, geez, I noticed that we're all just agreeing with everybody. Maybe it's time for someone to oppose.
You may at some point get to the point where you have to let go. You have to make that tough decision. So, a few things on this. So, at what point should a new executive leader consider terminating a toxic high performer? And as you describe the process, one, I'm curious about how do you know when you've gotten to that point of no return? How do you prepare for that transition? And then how do you manage the aftermath? Because you have to deal with that also. And how do you do that in a way that minimizes the disruption to the team and to the organization?
Yeah, so I literally just got off the call with an HR person talking about a leader that I'm going to start working with next week. And I said to her, "What's your plan B?" And she says, "That's the problem. We don't have one." I'm like, "Okay." And she literally said, "Jeff, you're our last shot." Right? And so I'm going to go in with this guy and I'm going to walk that fine line with trying to let him know that the organization really wants him to succeed and likes him and all that. And do you have a plan B? Because they sure as heck don't. Won't tell him that. So first of all, you should always have a plan B. In other words, always be building a bench, always be having succession planning, right? So
Mhm.
that's the first thing. But the second thing, in terms of like when do you know it's a point of no return? I talk about from four things, right? So one, are we able to really clearly define what does success look like? Are we giving this person a chance? What specifically do you want this person to be doing and not doing? And how are we going to measure it? Too often, it's a very sort of abstract. You need to, I don't know, stop getting people upset. What the heck does that mean? So that's the first thing. The second thing is, are they motivated to change? At an intervention, you're doing two things. First, you're trying to raise behavior. Raj, I've noticed that there are some concerns recently that I've noticed and some other people have noticed around your behavior, right? Raise awareness, give them some specific feedback, tell them specifically what you want to do. And are they open to feedback? Which I get it might sting at first, but are they open to feedback? And then are you giving them the support necessary for them to begin to make some changes? So the third thing is there still enough organizational support? A lot of times the intervention is too little, too late. And even if they're motivated and even if you can identify clearly defined metrics, nobody around them is willing to support them. And so that's unfortunate for them, right? Because they might be ready to go. But if you're going to start losing good people, then that's not good. And then finally, what's the relationship like between the manager and the problem child, right? And so you want to really be checking in and say, "Hey, let's just talk about our working relationship." Because if this person's failure is your failure, right? And so what am I doing in terms of managing and supporting you that's working, and what could I be doing different? And then, by the way, here's what I think is working with you, and here's what you could be doing different.
Jeff, I love that last part because it's almost like a best practices checklist of what an organization do to help manage those toxic employers, toxic performers that are on the team. Any last words of wisdom you want to share about that?
Yeah, lead with heart, right? So again, make decisions based on what's right for the organization, which could include letting someone go when it's time to let them go, but always do deliver through the heart.
Excellent, Jeff. Thank you very much for a very good conversation about this really important topic. We've all dealt with toxic performers, and it's good to know what to do to deal with them when you're the person that's part of that executive team that has to manage them. Thanks.
Thanks, Raj.